Welcome to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe now so you don't miss a drop of straight talk you can't get anywhere else. We discuss the whiskeys to drink, music to listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. I'm your host, Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. Tonight's guest, founder and owner of the Tobacco Barn Whiskey Distillery, Scott Sanders. Hey, what you drink? Yeah, I love it. You know, one of the things too that brings to mind is, I've spent 30 years in corporate America, working for some of the biggest brands on the planet. And I was in ever pursuit of becoming senior vice president of sales of one of those major corporations. In the last position that I had in corporate America, I was actually put in charge of capability building. And it was around training people to do these specific things under pristine circumstances. And that was the job description. That was the role. That's what I was there to do. But after a while, I shifted into this idea of leadership development. And as I'm thinking about it now, leadership is around how do you understand the capability, but teach and make it okay for your folks to have the capacity to know when do you step outside of these guardrails to do these other things so that we can still deliver the mission, the plan, the customer objective, whatever the case is, because we still have to get to that endpoint. And so I love the way that you are validating so many things that we have done accidentally.
Yeah, and you think you do them accidentally. You really were doing them for a reason. You just maybe didn't understand it. Because when you're building capability, you might be building capacity. You just don't understand it. But all the time, every time you're teaching somebody, to do things, and then you back off a little bit, and then back off more, and you let them fail, even though you could do it better. That's building capacity. Because it's all about, hey, you have to adjust and do things because nothing ever goes according to plan. Nothing in business goes according. We wrote a business plan. I can tell you, nothing goes according to plan.
Man, I'll tell you, my business plan is brilliant. You should see my business plan. If we can execute that business plan, we're all going to be incredibly happy. But to your point, a plan never survives the first contact with the enemy. I love that. I love that. I love that. One of the things you said just kind of in passing just now, I'd love to get some more insight about it. You talked about how leaders will do a great job of building capability, but then the wise leaders will back off a little bit, and they'll back off a little bit more, and they'll let the other person fail, in situations that aren't very treacherous. And then they'll give them a little bit more risk and a little bit more risk rather than stepping in to save the day. And that becomes the key to building capacity. But boy, I tell you, that's really scary when you're the manager, allowing your people to fail. It's even scary as a parent, allowing your child to fail. But I just sense that's really the only way to build capacity. Could you help me with that? Is that at the core of building capacity?
Yeah, you have to, because there's a couple things you can't, train in a scenario. And one of them is stress. There's a lot of difference between stress. I'll go back to carrier aviation because that's what I know. When there's good weather and this and that, and then stress in combat, two different things. And there's no way to replicate it. It's just absolutely no way. So you have to you're not going to let people fail in combat. Don't get me wrong there. But if you, during, I'll say, regular operations, you let people not do what you would have done, because there's always a lot of different ways of doing things. Okay, let them do it. And then they'll see, okay, maybe I should, maybe I ought to go this way. Or, there's simple things on fuel management. So once you take off an aircraft carrier, you're running out of gas. So you better know when you're getting, hey, when are you getting more gas?
Wow.
That type of thing. So it's always, now you never let anybody run out of gas, but okay, you make the decision. You know, how do you want to do this? Do you think you ought to tank immediately or do you want to go later? How do you do this? And then if you do it later, what if it doesn't work? What are you going to do now? You know, those type of things. So there's various ways that you work that in, and you build the stress builds up over time, so that you work through it. People used to ask me, well, weren't you afraid coming aboard the carrier? I said, I never thought about it because I was focusing on the training. And in carrier aviation, they teach you to only look at three things. To look at your, basically, if you're on speed or not. There's a little donut there you look at. They look to make sure that the runway is down the middle, because in a carrier, it's a little off center and it's always moving. So you have to keep that in the middle. And then you have to see where you're landing down there on the ship, because there's a glide slope thing you're looking at there. So you just look at those three things. Now, once you land and you feel the tug of the wire, then your knees start shaking because you're like, oh man, that was terrifying. And anybody that doesn't tell you they haven't been afraid landing at night in bad weather, they're just lying through their teeth. It's
Wow.
just, there's just no way. There are some nights you're like, oh my God, why am I doing this? But in the moment, you're not, you're just doing it.
Wow. I love, again, the way you said the moment you take off is the moment that you begin running out of gas, that you begin running out of fuel. And that reminds me of a conversation I had towards the beginning of the season, actually the beginning of season 3, where we talked with Dave Peacock, who former president of Anheuser-Busch, and he made a similar statement. He said that the moment you become CEO is the last day that you will get the truth, because the conditions have changed and everyone's going to be managing their career every time they talk to you. And so you've got to have some mechanisms in place for you to get the truth when people are reluctant to share that with you. What are some things that you've learned, perhaps in the military, and you've shared so many great learnings already, that have carried through and helped you as you have ventured into owning a distillery? I mean, totally different industries, but I'm sure there are some learnings that have just continued to prove to be true. What are a few more of those?
Let's get to the legal structure. Distilling is very regulated in the United States of America. And I'll tell you a little funny story. So Sean, my one partner, and I, this is out of 2010, 11, 12, something there. We said, hey, Dan knows how to make this stuff. And so we got on this thing called the internet, went on this place called Google, and we ordered the, Bourbon Master 5000 or whatever it was. And 3 weeks later, after gave them our credit card, this thing arrives. We're like, hot diggity dog, let's start making us some bourbon. And then so we open the box up. There's a little note in there. It says, we just like to inform you that if you attended distilling alcohol in the United States of America, any amount is illegal. and I still had a security clearance. I'm like, And the first thing I said was, Sean, I am so glad you used your credit card, because that was a true statement. And then we boxed the thing up and sent it back. So like, shit, didn't even know the rules. And then our friend Dan, who'd been distilling, he says, you dummies, you can't do that. So I get back to piracy. I never wanted to circumvent the rules. I wanted to understand them. So I was fighting pirates, and this is while Iraq and Afghanistan are going on. So this is not warfare. It's basically lawfare. And I had a European Union lawyer and an American lawyer with me at all times and all decisions. And some people could find that constricting. These were the kind of lawyers, they would tell you no if they had to, but they would always try to find a way to say yes. So because I had a international task force, so I had staff from all different nations, all over Europe, Turkey, Japan, all over the place. And so I said, hey, can I do this? Can I do that? How to, what's the proper way of doing this? So I never did anything improper, illegal, fattening, all the above, type of thing. So I just understood it. And that's kind of the way we approach our distillery now, too, is, what's the right way of doing this? Nobody likes paying taxes, but how do we pay taxes? What's the proper way? How do we count? All those type of things. And you just go through it like that. Same thing anytime when you're in business. And I've always found anybody that tries to cut corners, it doesn't do you any good in the long run. Just understand the rule set, get into them the way you are, and then work it out.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you are so right in that any shortcut looks good in the short run, but inevitably it's going to come back to hurt you. It's going to come back no matter what. I've never seen anyone who has taken shortcuts. I haven't seen them sustain because of that.
Yeah, I have. We do a lot of farmers markets. And as I tell people, we're just the only legal distillery in our county. There's plenty of distilleries here. So I'll go to farmers markets, and there are the moonshiners think I'm the ag extension agent for moonshiners in this county. Like, hey, Scott, what am I doing wrong? My conversion rate's off. What should I be doing? And they all have a 5-gallon thumper keg using turbo yeast or something, which they're not distilling on grain. And so it's a completely different thing. And so I always tell them, I say, hey, listen, I'll tell you kind of what's going on, but you know what you're doing. You can't do it. But hey, I'm not the feds. I'm not enforcing this, but just so you know, that's not the rule. Well, I thought you could make up to 10 gallons of personal alcohol. Wow. No, that's beer.
Wow. All right. Well, hey, so during our conversation, I had to do a little research on this brown juice that I'm enjoying. It's actually called Cat's Eye Distillery, and it's a handcrafted micro distillery. And that's why I had not heard of this before. And it is just really delicious. I still don't know the mash build, but I can just tell you that it is it's yummy. It's Obtainium light whiskey. And like I said, it's the Nassif family owns it. It's just some tasty stuff. Now, did I hear you right that you're kind of in this micro space?
Yeah, I think from a release standpoint, we're in the micro category. I think in the production, we might be in the small category. So we do about 6,000 proof gallons a year is what we do. And we're only releasing about 1,000 right now.
Okay.
We're at a step function where we have, not that you have to do this, it's just our business model. We do everything. So we grow the corn, we mash, cook, distill, age, bottle all of it. So we can buy bourbon cheaper on the open market and bottle it and sell it as ours. But so it takes a while to get there. And when you're a small distillery, you start out in smaller barrels because it's a lot easier to make a 5 or a 10 or a 30-gallon mistake than a 53-gallon mistake. Mm-hmm. And you learn that mistake earlier in time. So we actually started out in 5-gallon barrels, and you get a decent burn, about 10 months. Today I wouldn't say it's decent, but at the time I thought it was pretty good. And that got us in Whiskey Advocate as Maryland's bourbon, and we're pictured in there. So at that point, we know our mash bill was right, and our process, we just had to solidify things. So we did one more batch of 5-gallon barrels, which if you ever had Hudson Baby Bourbon, I think they do small barrels too.
Okay. Then
we went to 30-gallon barrels. Right, we're getting ready to hit probably about 6 months or so, we'll be releasing in 53s. But our oldest 53 is about 5 years and four months old right now. And so we'll be releasing, 5 years and 9 months or so when those come out. So the highest cost of goods sold, whether us or Brown and Foreman, is the wood. The barrels are just very expensive. And so, and there's no economies of scale. So a 30-gallon barrel costs $20 less than a 53, and it only holds, quote, half as much or so in that range. So you can't run a distillery on 30-gallon barrels because you go broke. And so, anyways, you have to work up to 53s, but you can't do it initially. So, and that's just the way we did it. I'm not saying it's the right way, it's just what we did.
Got it. Got it. Well, hey, man, I am really, really enjoying this conversation. And so now, I typically ask this question of a lot of my guests, and I think you are uniquely qualified to weigh in on this because the name of this podcast is Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. And in my head, those three intersect perfectly. But I find that I have a hard time explaining that intersection to other people at the same level of clarity that it sits in my head. To you, what is the intersection between whiskey, jazz, and leadership?
The intersection is, well, especially for whiskey and jazz, it's about sharing it with friends. What two things just don't go good together? And I'll get back to running the counter piracy task force. I got together with a lot of other leaders. We had a little bourbon. We didn't have any jazz music going, but so we would sit down, share a little glass, and we'd talk about kind of the leadership philosophies of how to combat piracy. And it was great because nobody is for piracy except for the pirates. And so it's kind of, okay, what are your best lessons learned? It's very, very sharing. So it's very, very collaborative, which is kind of like whiskey. Whiskey is the original crowdsourced product of this nation.
Ooh.
If you go to any distiller, everybody loves talking about how they make their whiskey, their bourbon, their whatever it is, because they're passionate about it. And you get it. Now, if you go to the marketing departments, they won't even stab you in the back. They'll stab you right in the front, that type of thing. The marketing people, they're a different breed. But the distillers, when you love bourbon or you love whiskey, hey, you're going to share, because you know what? There's no magic secrets in there. It's all how you do it. It's your process, your mash bill, where you do it. You can't replicate this stuff. Brown and Foreman can't replicate what Sazerac's doing. It doesn't work that way. So a mash bill is just a recipe. So, hey, we've all had grandma's cookies. They both taste different. And boy, they were damn good. And one used pecans, one used walnuts, and I ate them both.
Well, I love it. This has been incredible. If you guys are listening to this, you've received a real education to understand what's the difference between whiskey and bourbon. That your explanation is going to be etched and burned into my memory now. Thank you so much for that. I love the way that you are bringing in these principles that you've learned while you were landing carriers and you were landing planes and doing this in defense of our country. I take pride in a lot of the leadership things that I've done in the corporate boardroom, but man, it's got to be nothing as compared to doing that when you got people shooting at you or trying to take countries. But still, I mean, the ramifications are a lot more grand, a lot more grave, and so I just have so much respect for folks who can lead when it really, really matters. So, and then just to bring that into this conversation, I just really appreciate it. As a matter of fact, you know what? If you've got some more time, I want to bring this conversation into our VIP room, because I want to ask you more questions about what it takes to be an effective leader. And are there some principles that we can come up with that you think are core to being successful? Whether you're doing this in the military, whether you're doing this at your own distillery, whether you're just trying to make today a little bit better than yesterday, and hopefully be in a position to make tomorrow even better than everything. But I want to do that in the VIP room. I don't want to share that for free. So we've shared all this good stuff for free. And boy, It's only $4 to become a VIP, dude. I mean, I don't know what they're doing if they're not gonna pay $4 to get the rest of this conversation. Then I don't know what to tell you. But man, hey, for now, how can people get a hold of your juice of the gods if they want to taste some Tobacco Barn bourbon? How can they get a hold of you? How can they learn more about you?
Again, we're mainly in Maryland right now. That's just because we distribute that. The good news is we sell every bottle we make or put out. The bad news is we put out less than 1,000 cases last year. So it's in Maryland. We're just at www.tobaccobarndistillery.com. It harkens back to when every farm around here was a tobacco farm. Now we've converted it to a corn farm now to make bourbon from. And maybe when we go to the VIP room, I'll talk a little bit about how bourbon and whiskey in America got its start in the English Reformation. It's wacky how it goes back to Henry VIII. But anyways, so that they can get in touch with us. Hopefully in a couple of years, we'll have more as it comes out here. We'll be probably a standard 6-year-old bourbon out of a number 3 char 53-gallon barrel in the mid-Atlantic states here. Right now, you can order us in Maryland and DC. We can ship there. And if we are able to mail to military installations. So if somebody's on a military installation, we can mail to any military installation, or if there's a UPS store on a military installation. So as long as it's in the 50 states, we can do that.
Oh, fantastic. Well, hey man, raise your glass. Let's toast out and see if we can duck into the VIP room. This has been great. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Galen.
Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.